Today we're going to be covering more of Before Watchmen. This is going to be the story of the comedian and how he went from being known as a great superhero to a fallen superhero. This is Comedian's War Journals. Welcome to the Complete Story series. This is where we take trade paperbacks and single issues and we break them down into a really epic digital motion comic basically. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. I hope you guys enjoy this tale. I enjoyed reading it.
It's the evening. Clear skies and a nice temperature. The comedian is sitting in his bed. With the radio going off singing a song, memories flood into his head. Times that he preferred. He reached over to grab a baseball with a signature on it, thinking back to another place. One where he was with the Kennedys, playing football with the president. You see, Eddie Blake, the comedian, was a dear friend of JFK. They were close, almost too close some would say. And Eddie would do anything for the Kennedys. They were closer to him than his own family, and he was a man with special skills. You see, some people would call Eddie a superhero within this world. A crime fighter, a good guy, and some would call JFK that, and maybe that's why they got along. But Eddie knows the truth about himself. He's more of a hired gun. And sometimes people use this to their advantage, like when Jackie Kennedy asked Eddie to handle a little problem, a bird that would sing if left to her own drug-addled ways, such as Marilyn Monroe. But it's okay, because Eddie handled problems for the family. This is how things were handled, but it's also the eventual downfall of a hero. As John asked Eddie to go over to a war that they were staging, he wanted boots on ground in Vietnam to show what the country was fighting for. But as he was boarding his plane, the director asked for his help on a situation, one where Moloch was starting a problem, Moloch being the only true villain of this world. Eddie was driven to the site where he crashed the car through the gates, and he leaped out shooting up the thugs. They all stood behind the boxes returning fire, but Eddie was a hero, and heroes don't fall. He stood up with a shotgun in one hand and a pistol in the other, and he killed many that day and knocked out the others. As they ran up the stairs, Eddie threw them over the side as he bashed their heads in, and eventually he walked into Moloch's office. But what he found wasn't a villain or a terrifying sight, but a man crying at the news. Eddie was confused, telling him, "We've been through this before, you should grab a gun or something." And Moloch turned back with tears in his face. The TV was displaying the news for the world to hear. The day the world stood still. A man of peace, a hero to all, some would say a superhero, had fallen. He had been shot. Eddie lowered his gun as he turned his back, and Moloch continued to cry. He asked for a drink, and Moloch pointed him to his whiskey. And as he looked out the window, he asked if Moloch had any drugs here. Moloch told him, "Yeah, that's why you're here, isn't it?" And as Eddie takes a shot, he looks out closing his eyes. And the news announced that at the time of 2 o'clock Eastern Standard, in some 30 minutes ago, the president was announced dead. JFK was shot. Eddie's friend. Eddie put his hand on Moloch's shoulder, and Moloch placed his hand on top of Eddie's, and he asked him, "What are we gonna do now?" Eddie went on his mission, arriving in Vietnam. The Vietnam War was more of a civil war between the North and the South, with one side fighting for communism and the other side fighting for its own freedom. Originally, Kennedy wanted to send Eddie in with the U.S. troops to draw a line in the sand. Communism would not win this day, and Kennedy wanted the U.S. to see their superhero, the comedian, there on the front lines. He would prove that this was a fight worth fighting and bolster the support within the troops. He met with Colonel Pitch, and he showed Eddie to his quarters. Eddie was awoken by the shots being fired at the camp along with the other soldiers, so Eddie locked and loaded. He took them to battle, ready to fight it out. Maybe he needed to vent after everything. Maybe he needed to show the world what the US could do, or maybe he just wanted to shoot someone. He called it a war, but the soldiers didn't really believe that. They knew that this was truly a war on communism, an invisible enemy that was surmounting across the world in the Cold War. And Eddie's friend, John Kennedy, truly believed that we needed to stop it. So Eddie believed that. He blasted off into a field and everyone lit up the enemies. And when they ran out of bullets and grenades, he ran in, stabbing the enemy over and over. He took a shot and he smiled as he stood up, blood splattered across his face. "I think I'm gonna like it here." And the soldiers told him that he'd be the first. As the battle raged on, they talked about the fact that the government was committed to fighting communism in the jungle, but they didn't give them the manpower to accomplish this goal. And Eddie told them, "They gave you me." He leaped into his next mission shouting, "Oorah!" And with a gun on his back, he walked up to a building with armed guards and an interesting man. He walked up on that man, a man named Sal, and he put him on his knees with his hands on the back of his head. The man knew Eddie, and Eddie knew the man. He called out for the comedian to stop. He can't kill him in cold blood. And as Eddie blew the cigar smoke out of his mouth, he told Sal, "You can't tell me what to do. I work for a higher power." And then he leaned in, and it just so happens to be the same one as you. Sal was confused, but quickly it came together. You see, at this time, the Vietnam War was not a war for the US, so they couldn't get official funding. And in another chapter of Eddie's life, he watched as the America that he swore to protect changed again, as they sold drugs that they were collecting to fund this little non-war. As they tried to figure out how to get more drugs to the US so that the US would unknowingly fund their operations, everything changed again. The US was attacked in international waters, and the president chose to not respond. And the men on the field said it was time to shit or get off the pot. They need to make this a war or they gotta leave. Eddie grabbed his rifle. It's time to shit. The war, it moved on as the president called it to action. Some time passed and Eddie was at a tiki bar when he got a call. Bobby Kennedy was calling and wanted to know what happened because Eddie was slipping. He was slipping fast. You see, Eddie got off the plane after a year in combat in Vietnam, only to see protesters. Protesters for an American hero. The comedian was a goddamn superhero, and they were protesting the war and therefore him. A sweet young girl walked up asking Eddie to bring a flower back to Vietnam with him, to prove that not all Americans are evil, and she was hit in the head by a tomato by the anti-protesters throwing fruit. The Americans were fighting against each other over a war that none of them had to even fight. He went on his day thinking about it, dwelling on that nice girl who got hit, and that's when he saw the civil rights movement on the TV. He smirked because he knew that it was a way for him to vent his frustrations. He walked in behind the police shooting at the shooters, and they told him to get back, so he walked in the middle of it. While the riots were continuing, he was wearing face paint. Yellow paint with a smile painted on his face. On the phone call, Bobby Kennedy told Eddie that he crossed the line, and Eddie told him that he didn't, because there was no line. The rioters ran up asking him what he's doing here. Does he find it funny? And Eddie told the woman, "You should laugh, because it's a riot." She shouted at him, "This isn't a riot, it's a revolution, and it's not going anywhere." Eddie continues smiling. "I can make it go away." She looks at him. "You think so? The world is watching." He takes aim. "You know what it's gonna see?" And he begins to shoot out the windows to his store, and everyone begins to loot the TVs and appliances. Exactly what it wants to see. The woman begins to shout for everyone to stop doing what the man wants, and Eddie tells her, "It's not about what the man wants, it's about what the people want." And as he continues shooting out the windows of all of the buildings, the individuals continue looting. He walks out as the police chief calls everyone looting monkeys. All of them are monkeys in a zoo. And that's when he gets a pile of feces thrown in his face. He turns to see Eddie acting like a monkey and laughing at him. And Bobby Kennedy on the phone tells him, "You're in trouble. You need to apologize, Eddie." And Eddie told him no. "Let me tell you something, Bobby. For a second, those riots stopped because of me. Because I was there." "Why was it only for a second, Eddie?" "Ha! Because I was there." Some time passed and the soldiers arrived at a village looking for Eddie because he murdered everyone there. Women, children, elderly. The sight caused many to vomit and others to question God. And eventually they found themselves in the outskirts with a guy on his knees and a gun pointed at his head. So they shot Eddie down like a dog. He wakes up in a helicopter as they're hauling him out of the area. He wakes up woozy and dazed from the tranks they gave him. And in front of him is Bobby and John Kennedy. He's obviously hallucinating. They tell him this was almost done. The war was ending. But if this gets out, if the world finds out that their hero murdered a whole village, we'll be at our own end zone. It'll be game over, Eddie. As Eddie gets up, he grabs the commander and he jumps out of the helicopter. But before all of this, Eddie had gotten word that Bobby Kennedy had declared that he was running for president. He declared that he would end the Vietnam War with peace. And when Eddie went to go call the family, the Kennedys, to tell them what a great idea it was, Bobby wouldn't take his calls. So that night, after already going through so much and finally reaching some form of breaking point, Eddie went on his mission and they gave him acid. Acid that was in the comedian's own likeness. The comedian was a famous drug now. He placed it on his tongue and he went into the village. And back in the present day, Eddie hits the jungle with the commander in tow. He begins to walk off, but Benway calls out that he can't leave him to die here. And Eddie tells him, "I fell out of the helicopter when I woke up from your tranks and you died in the fall. Not my fault." He brings Benway anyway, and when he asked why he did it, Eddie told them, "We're fighting a war with rules, and they have done. I figured that it was time to show them what fighting with no rules meant. We should be scaring everyone into fearing us, into fearing being our enemy. Fear keeps the peace. We all have our roles, Benway. Mine just happens to be for real. You and your company, screw you guys." Life is a war, and if you can't win it, you lose it. Winning and losing doesn't matter. It's about control. I've been called a lot of things. Psycho, soldier, superhero, whatever that damned Night Owl book said. The one thing that no one ever got about me is that I'm a patriot. Eddie Blake walked out of the jungle and the helicopter came in to rescue the two men, and it shot up Benway, killing him. You see, the US government decided that it would be best to cover up the whole massacre and let the comedian be a superhero still. Make sure that no one could rat out the whole thing. Benway became a liability. Eddie Blake was sent back to the US where he went on to be a superhero, but nothing really stuck for him. This was not a life that he could believe in any longer. Where was the US that he worked for, that he protected? And in through the window of the building that he was in comes Night Owl and Rorschach. Eddie just cleared out the Rat Men, a local gang, and two other superheroes arrived to follow up in the same report. Eddie lights a cigar. The door was open, you morons. Night Owl looks at him. I thought you were in Vietnam, comedian. Heart's there, so is my mind. I'm here, doing the job that you pretended to. Night Owl snaps at him. Pretending? We've been tracking the Rat Pack for weeks. Why? What the f*** were you waiting for? He looks at Night Owl. You don't have the stomach for this business. And Rorschach asks him, what do you see when you look at me? Eddie walks out. I see the future, and I didn't mean that as a compliment. As the days went on, he was called by Bobby Kennedy. He wanted to talk. And Eddie was happy to see his old friends, so he smiled. It was a family friend. The Kennedys would always be there for him, and he would always be there for them. And while Bobby canceled their first meeting, he did ask for breakfast. Eddie went off to a strip club where his CIA contact passed him a folder and explained the situation. Both Bobby Kennedy and Nixon were about to run for president. Bobby wants peace and wants to pull the troops out, while Nixon also wants peace, but he feels that we can't show weakness, so he intends to win. And then, the next morning, Eddie woke up to Bobby Kennedy in his room stating that he couldn't wait. Bobby sits at the edge of the bed and he tells Eddie, we need to talk. And Eddie puts his face into his hands. I gotta talk to you too, Bobby. I know what you did, Eddie, and I know that the CIA is trying to cover it all up, but I can't have that. If it gets out that you massacred a whole town, women, children, elderly, and they connected it to the Kennedy family, well, that would be the end of us. I want to get ahead of it. I want to show the information to the press. Sure, Eddie, you'll do a few years in Leavenworth, but you'll get out. I'll do what I can, even if it's only very little. Eddie stands up and he takes a drink. Let me tell you, if you do that, you'll be a rat. And if I do it, I'm confessing with your support. It might even get you elected. That's not what this is about, Eddie. I know. I'm sorry, Eddie, for what this will do to you and what you did. The next day, the camera flashes are going off around everyone. Bobby was up for his conference with Eddie Blake, the superhero, standing next to him. Bobby walks into the next area asking Eddie what he wanted to talk to him about the night before. They got sidetracked with everything going on, and Eddie tells him, the CIA has a brainwashed patsy who's trying to assassinate you tonight. Bobby pauses. What? Relax, Bobby. And at that moment, the gunman comes out, firing bullets into the crowd. Pop, pop, pop. And then Eddie pulls out his own pistol, and he grabs Bobby. Relax. I got you. He went to his car as the radio played, with blood on his face and sweat on his forehead. He just murdered the soon-to-be president and his friend. He looks up as the blood drips onto his smiley button, and we are left with the Watchman's button.
And there you have it, the comedian. A man forced to do what no man should ever have to do. Kill the only individuals that he considers friends and family. Betrayed by the US and left to rot on his own with CIA missions. Don't forget to check out the rest of the Before Watchmen series right here. This video is going to tell you what is the Watchmen, and I'm going to put the subscription button somewhere around here. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.